more of my new creation myth and other matters chemical. Everyone on this planet is now wired up to want to have their brain chemistry continually changed. This includes anything that I could name. I'll start naming some of the obvious that we were mentioning last time we were taping. Drugs, religion, love, sports, ice cream, greed, everybody now is wired to want, without them knowing, but to want to have the brain chemistry continually altered. Notice even what would seem to be, from many people's view, extraordinary attempts for people to do something for whatever reason they believe, such as those who retire from life, normally referred to as monks. There would seem to be, from certain people's historical, if not contemporary view, people who are really determined to press on and reach some kind of weird state of understanding. And without exception, what do? The ground rules are to deny themselves almost all of what would seem to be the basically enjoyable pleasures, sensual, carnal, and not sensual. That is, and they believe that some of it is spiritual rather than physical. They deny themselves. For what reason? And don't say because they're trying, that is from your ordinary view, don't say because they're trying to be godly. They deny themselves for one reason. Because they want to drink. Because they want to take drugs. Because they want to engage in all kinds of sexual activity. That is the only reason that people deny themselves. They attempt to deny themselves. Now the primary, if you recall, as I've been arbitrarily describing it, primary activities, those activities without which a man would die, without which the race would die, with no great elaboration, just sex, physical comfort enough not to freeze to death, not to burn up, enough food to stay alive. But at that level, the primary activities are also affecting the chemistry of man, but to use my arbitrary description for the time being, it is below the cerebral level. But that is what all activity is. If you're eating the plainest food, not dining, eating to stay alive, just plain ordinary food, you're changing the chemistry of the body. Every time you engage in sex, you're changing the chemistry of the body. Every time you're horny and don't engage in sex, you're shifting the chemistry of the body. Can any of you jump fast enough and realize, just for a second, just imagine we're talking about man still in some sort of describable and recognizable condition without the intellect operating. From here down, if he's alive, what's going on? The brain chemistry, the chemistry of everything below the brain is continually changing. It is changing in the lungs, it's changing in the blood system, it is changing in all systems in man. If you're alive, there is a constant chemical alteration going on. There is no way out of it. But at that level, to take an example, eating. And you people on tape, let me say this is arbitrary, my descriptions, but they are telling if you can follow it for the time being. If we were looking at just eating to stay alive, then what you would be eating would be the plainest of fare, let's assume. Because if that's all you were doing, you would only be getting your hands on whatever would minimally keep you alive, maintain your weight, and that would be affecting the chemistry of everything from the intellect down. Nowadays, everyone on this planet to varying degrees are involved with secondary matters. And in secondary matters is where it shifts from such things as eating to stay alive, affecting the chemistry of the body, to eating that which seems to be personally pleasurable to you, such as, let's say, chocolate. Now, chocolate will affect the chemistry, obviously, of the body. It's not a matter of whether it will keep you alive by itself. But the reason people have a personal taste in ice cream or chocolate or pizza is now no longer simply the matter of changing the chemistry of the body to such a degree is to maintain your weight, keep your health at the level wherever it is. It is now specifically to affect the chemistry of the brain. This does not belie the fact that those who love chocolate and ice cream and everything else can say, well, I do enjoy it. If I don't overdo it, my little body just tingles, my stomach and my lips and my taste buds. I know all that. But were it not for the brain, you would not be eating those things that were anywhere beyond the plainest of fare. That which would be that you would most efficiently, most expeditiously, at the least expense, at the least effort, that would keep you alive, that's what you would grab. You would go out in the backyard and you would grab whatever fruits and berries would keep you alive, and you would not walk the extra mile down the street where they had an ice cream tree. You would not. There is the, well, in case this is not clear enough before I'll give you more examples, it's just to properly serve life's up-to-date needs. Everybody on this planet now, to varying degrees, are involved with secondary activities. You can just consider that just a blanket reality. It is to varying degrees. There are people that are living in more feral, rural circumstances that are engaged in less activities. Those who are actually having to get up and to hunt or having to farm 14 or 18 hours a day, just enough to keep themselves alive. They are engaged in less secondary activities, but you may now consider it a safe statement that everyone on this planet, to varying degrees, are involved with secondary activities, hobbies, attempting to affect a change in their own brain chemistry. Now, I've given examples before, but I want you to just consider it along the lines of the chemical alteration. Instead of simply sex, you now have romance or love. But whereas sex would be my arbitrary decision again, but if we cut the line right here at the cerebral part of the brain, that you're no longer a conscious, intellectual human, but you're still some sort of human that we can talk about. Then from this line down, sex is certainly altering the chemistry of the organism. But then when you get into, you can call it romance or love, that is something more now than just sex, just the physical act. It's now something more. The something more specifically is to change the chemistry of the brain. Why else would people write poetry? Why else do you read poetry? Why do people say, to look at you just gives me the chills? That may be true at the time this person says it. But at the level of simple sex, the chill produces no chemical reaction in the brain that would drive someone to say, you give me the chills. It has to be now that the brain itself is seeking to be altered, to be changed, the chemistry itself. Rather than people out actually hunting or having to gather up their food every day. For one example, I can use the one variation, a secondary variation of that is now sports. Whether it be you actually doing it or whether it be vicariously. That is not far removed from the primary activity of hunting and gathering. But now, since you're not required to do that other than look for sales, then sports, to men, sports produces part of that. But notice there is even a difference now. of you just getting out and running. If you could get out, let's say, and run, or whatever exercise you were inclined to do, and you could do it with no thought. That is, you're not thinking about how you're wearing cheap running clothes from J.C. Penney, and a car full of good-looking girls just passed and you wish you had something more expensive, or you're worrying about how long it's going to take you to lose weight and blah, blah, blah. If you were just out running, which I'd rather go back, although it's sort of anachronistic, I'd rather say back to actually having to hunt, get up every day as soon as you awoke and get out and have to look for food. If you were still living at that level without this, then there's no question about it changing the brain chemistry if you weren't dealing from this level. But now sports, for the one example, that now sports to read about or to be out running as most people would with the brain operating, that they cannot purely do it. But let's say they're just sitting down reading about it or watching it on television, it is now to change the chemistry here. Because you're not out changing it from here down by some purely, singularly, pristine physical act that would only be affecting the general chemistry of the body without this. That get too sticky. Physically being comfortable, getting in and out of the elements, being warm, changes the chemistry of the body, assuming that you're sane enough to fit into the middle class, the middle of the bell curve of life. Then you would be seeking the kind of comfort that would keep the body alive. But then beyond that, it becomes nowadays secondary activities. That goes beyond mere comfort. It has got to become luxury. It has got to become excesses. You're not only warm, you have to be warm with the latest fashion. You got to be doubly warm, or you not only have a nice place to lay and stay dry inside of a house or an apartment, but now you want an even fancier bed, a $2,000 mattress, new blankets and quilts, new sheets. And if it's not that, it becomes fiscal wealth. That I'll pile up some money, which there's nothing wrong with, but what's the sense of piling up money? What's that got to do with being comfortable? And don't fall into the old joke about the guy that got hit and he's laying there and they say, "Are you comfortable?" while they're waiting for the ambulance. You all know that joke. I don't. It is a secondary activity. It is necessary, but to be piling up money in a bank account or wherever, to be filing and adding to numbers down in a book somewhere, or to actually have the cash money there, for those of you that think it's worth anything. To have it there, and then next week you got more, it's a fine hobby. But it is to change the brain chemistry. It's not to do you any good from here down. Now you can say, well, I can have this, and if something bad happened to me, if I lost my job, then at least I know I would eat. Well, that's pretty good. But if that's true, why don't you just go buy a bunch of food and store it up? Well, then your brain would say, well, food would spoil. Well, how far do I have to take everything? Well, I'm saving up to get a car, a new car, a different car. You're dealing with, when it comes to all manner of excesses, and with excesses I do not mean in an ordinary pejorative sense. If you've got more food than you can eat today, in one sense you're dealing in excesses. They just seem, if you got more clothes than you'll ever wear, you're dealing in excesses. Nothing wrong with it, it's a hobby. I don't know how to pull in an example of sex, because you can't kind of file it away. Unless if you're a man, I guess if you had 4 or 5 women stashed in closets and under your bed. There is a secondary variation of all the primary activities. And when it gets into the secondary variation, all of those have to do specifically with affecting the brain chemistry. Not that it's totally unrelated, although I'm making this arbitrary in my verbal description and saying it's a division or drawing a line. But romance is not in any way separate from sex. It can't be. There would be no romance. Or sports is not some modern illusionary activity that in which people engage because they do not get enough exercise themselves. it is still related to that, or there would not be sports. There would not be fashion were it not for the need to stay comfortable. There would not be luxury in housing or bed covers unless there was the need to get in out of the elements and to stay warm at night when your body tends to slow down, and you would not have luxury. But can you see that there is a reality to it, not just me drawing some verbal picture to make you agree to it, but there are things that are going on continually that affect the chemistry, let's say, of you without this, such as sex, such as actual physical labor that you had to do, or actually seeking out a place to stay warm at night if you had to, or maybe digging a hole, digging into a snowbank to get a place to stay warm. That would be affecting directly the chemistry of you as a person without this, to follow it arbitrarily for a second. But as soon as it gets past the point of primary activities, of the absolute basic minimal stuff and effort that it would take to stay alive and maintain your health and weight, when it gets beyond that, it is tied to directly wanting to affect the chemistry of the brain. Not down here. Because if it was just that, you would not go past eating whatever the closest food that would keep you alive was available. It would not go beyond merely engaging in sex with not much more than the level of rutting, with no idea of romance, no idea that the other person was of any consequence, and etc. It is not possible. I repeat that nowadays, to serve life's up-to-date needs, everyone on this planet, to varying degrees, are involved with hobbies. They're involved with secondary activities, which is where I started tonight's tape, that everyone now is wired up to want, to affect, to alter, to convert, to shift, to change their brain chemistry. And it's not just drugs, movies, anything, reading, fiction, non-fiction, walking, not walking. That is, as long as you've got an intellect. Because if you've got the intellect, then whatever it is you're doing beyond the primary activities is an attempt. You just have never had the definition of it, the description, but it is the attempt to directly alter the brain chemistry. At that level, at which everyone is now obligated to varying degrees, at that level there is no ill with this. And I'm not going to get into, some of you should already be able to put it together, but I'm not going into why certain ways to affect brain chemistry seem to be less than agreeable to life in general. It comes and it goes. Right now we're going through a whole new redoing of, at least in our part of the world. For instance, let's just take alcohol. All of you know it's already seemed to level off. 2 or 3 years ago, all the groups and all the advertisements and all the public service ads about, we've just gone too far. This part of life's body, we're drinking too much and people are killing each other on the highway. And it was, for a while, it seemed to be sort of faddish to say, no thanks, I'm not drinking tonight. And of course, drugs of different kinds have always been, here and there, given a bad name. And there's no one to reasonably stand up now and say a good word, let us say, for cocaine. And I'm certainly not. Or heroin, or excessive drinking. But if you take that as being an advancement of life's interest that says, well, anything that affects the brain chemistry, anything that alters your sense of reality, as many people like to say, which is affecting your brain chemistry, that we should not do that. And people are very inclined to say that who are religious. But religion, or fiction, but let's stay here, maybe you get the point, but religion, and all of its rituals are just reading about religion, reading some holy book, dreaming of the gods. But let's say that you're actually involved with some activity, that you're actually going to some religious institution and going through some sort of procedure, some sort of ritual, that is affecting the brain chemistry. It is no different, not at a more complex level, it is no different than cocaine. It's no different than alcohol. Daydreaming about religion is the same thing as the rituals of religion. What I was trying to get you to consider is there is nothing ill, there is nothing amiss about wanting to affect your brain chemistry. If you're alive nowadays, you've got no choice. It is not an option. You may feel as though you're too smart if you're ordinary, or that you're too sophisticated, or that you've been rehabilitated, and that you wouldn't drink or you wouldn't take drugs, that it's just a very sorry alternative to living a straight, clean life, and etc., and being a good Christian or a Jew or something. It is not an option. If you're alive today, you are going to be attempting to change your brain chemistry. The only possible alternative, which is not, if you're ordinary, would be to go and join, I'm talking about super cloistered monkery activities. I mean, it'd have to be some kind of retreat, some kind of redoubt that I've never even heard of. It'd like to be, instead of all the monks together and maybe not talking, it'd be like each monk had his own little cell with no windows, no noise, and you stayed in there forever. That you didn't even see each other. Forget not talking. You didn't see each other. You never had sex. You never ate. Well, you'd have to eat something like the world's plainest gruel. Just something to keep you alive. It is not possible. There is no option to the desire, to the attempt, to the success of altering your brain chemistry. If you'll also get a quick glimpse while I'm here, as it is with all secondary, just speaking in general, secondary matters, in the affecting the brain chemistry games, is always required the use of words. You've got to talk. You've got to use words, whereas if you were simply, again, if we could arbitrarily cut off the intellect, the feeding of the cerebral part, frontal lobes of the brain, you could change in the way necessary to maintain your health and weight and keep you alive. You could change the chemistry of everything from here down with no talk whatsoever. But you cannot change it here without the use of talk. It cannot be changed. I could stop here, but surely some of you could run your own and point out the kinds of things, I don't know whether some of you think are so obvious or whether you think they're so obscure that it can't be what it sounds like. You could not engage in hobbies. You could not engage in secondary affairs. You could not engage in anything that would affect the brain chemistry unless you could talk. You couldn't read a book. You couldn't be religious. You couldn't engage in rituals. You couldn't watch TV. You couldn't have a TV. You could not do those things that would directly affect the chemistry of the brain unless you could talk. Now, rather than pursuing examples of that, let me just point out that to be conscious is to want your brain chemistry altered. I can rhetorically say, what's to be noted after that? But I guess I'll note a few things, but some of you. What is ordinary thought? At least me using consciousness throws you off. What is ordinary thought? All of you know as much high school biology, if not zoology, as the case may be, that you know. Let's just take the ordinary acceptance of what they claim to know about the brain. That to think is to have chemical operations going on in the brain. Let's just assume that that's true without a doubt. Any first-year intern knows that. If you watch PBS, The cheapest special they may have on the brain, they'll point that out. That they can test it, there's no doubt about it, and they even have some of the chemicals named. To think, just in the ordinary sense, to think at all is to have the brain chemistry being changed. If it's not undergoing some sort of change right now, you're not thinking. In case any of you have ever been to some of the small eastern hamlets in Tennessee, you see people. Or perhaps unexpectedly walked in on an attorney or a priest. Ordinary thought. There's no doubt besides the jokes, I just assume that all of you can spring off from that one level that ordinary thought is, beyond the electrical aspects of it, but is a shift continually in the chemical makeup of the brain. That's what a thought is. Can you now push it a bit further? Can you see that from a more complex, futuristic view, that words themselves are the ultimate brain drug? Not cocaine. The word cocaine, in many people, too many people, is more of a drug than cocaine. Now, those of you that I hear a certain laugh, would you go back in your brain right quick to the last time we were taping and me trying to point out that the drug problem now is not a problem of drugs, it's not a problem of people. The problem is now the drug problem. The word cocaine. I know this gets subterranean. Let me take a real chance. Because I bet some of you got a screwed up enough old-time nervous system before you got involved with this to understand some of this. There are people around that could just say the word cocaine or vodka and get a jolt. Now, at least you take that as being some sort of immoral lapse in other people. There are people that can say the word God. There are people that can say hate. There are people that can say big bucks. Now, we might agree that just saying big bucks or rich is not the same as having $1 billion. But what do you think ordinary people sing the praises of imagination for? Why do you think people write books? Why do you think humanity has a memory? It's because words are drugs. Now, in the past, I pointed out to you that you could look at memory, verbal memory, as being a kind of exceptionally good job of life, pre-packaging, repackaging, freezing, way beyond Brother Birdseye, of energy in foods to where you can recall it, you can retrieve it. But rather than just look at it as drugs, as food, is look at it as actual drugs. Because at the secondary level, at the level at which humanity is doing its best work for life, I'm not going to put it to you as a question or a suggestion. I'm just going ahead and say that words are the ultimate drug. There's nothing. Cocaine, alcohol. Surely I don't have to go into some sort of sermon. Do I? There's no doubt. Especially somebody not that used to drinking, you can have a certain amount of alcohol, or even if you're used to drinking. You get enough, it'll kill you. But at least you can get enough, and just in a few matter of minutes, you're almost out of your mind. That from here down, all the motor skills are gone, and from here up, the brain is in such disrepute that you can barely talk, or you're not sure who you are, or you know what it is. But to say, all right, now that is powerful. But think about it. Words have more power than that over people. Not theoretically. That's why I was hesitating to have to go into some great verbal explanation of this, which certainly deserves none and will not really lend itself to a great verbal description. But words are the ultimate drug. Cocaine can't begin to touch words. Such as many people, not many of you seem to have heard it, but the word cocaine. Just think about it. I guess I'm going to have to try to give you a few hints. The word cocaine. An average person is standing around somewhere and somebody comes up and says, some cocaine. Without me having to spend all this time, somebody who is wired up to want some cocaine, let's say, or a drink or anything. Think about all that implies. All of the chemical alterations that will go on in their brain faster than certainly I can begin to talk about, but all the things about, you look at the guy that just said that, and he looks like he might be from South America, so the stuff might be real good. Plus you notice he came in with 3 girls, and so if you buy some from him, one of the girls might go off with you. I'm just having to slow all this down, but it is like a whole lifetime, a part of your lifetime, will flash through your brain just on the basis of a guy comes up to you and says, cocaine? And like that, it is like a whole episode of some soap opera. Or it's like a whole movie of you and everything that cocaine conveys to your brain. At the secondary level, which is the prime function of modern man in life, words are the ultimate brain drug. Talk can be more efficient, can have a greater effect upon the brain chemistry than any processed drug. And I kept bringing up things like the word cocaine. But it can be love, or it can be death. Somebody can walk up to you and say, I got some terrible news. Your mother died this afternoon. We just heard about it. Think what the words do. And don't ignore it. Don't say, well, that's just, anybody knows I'd give you the blues. It's words. They are energy. And they are the ultimate drug at the secondary level. Not what would seem to be the physical pain that you would no doubt suffer, assuming you were close to your mother, to end up actually there with your mother dead, at the funeral. That there is a physical reality that you can ache. You can get at least a stomach ache. You may cry to the point that your face hurt. But before that, somebody came up and said, your mother died this afternoon. Don't just stay on any one example. I'm not just trying to give you the blues, because it can apparently be something encouraging. That somebody comes up and they say, where you work? And they say, I know you have applied several times in the last couple of years for the promotion up to such and such level. And you go, yeah. And the guy says, I'm not at liberty to make any promises, but I've been around the recent meeting upstairs, and you may be in for a pleasant surprise next week. I can't, but think about it. Were it not for words having this powerful, unequaled effect to drug the brain, to alter the chemistry of the brain, why would anybody talk? Why would anyone make promises? Why would anyone accept another promise? Why would anyone accept a suggestion? Why would anyone accept advice? Why would anyone ignore advice? Why would anyone solicit advice? Why would you read a book? Because reading a book, your own brain is talking. The words, even if they appear to be silent, that is, no one's reading the book to you, but the words there on the page, the matrix, the dots, the ink, turns into a form of energy, and it's a drug. It is a drug without equal. There's a great term, and I have never tried to look up, it doesn't matter. Whoever first thought of it must have had a better insight, whatever made their tongue do it, because the way it's used now leaves out a certain spark. But the term I had in mind is loose cannon. And I only hear it used nowadays in political circles. But let me tell you what a loose cannon, the prototype, was. If dictionaries were done the right way, no matter who came up with it. When you looked under loose cannon, if it was actually in the dictionary, there should be a picture of the human brain. The human intellect, because for those of you that have any doubt, I'm going ahead, I've never, as I said, the way they use it, they leave out the connotation. But consider what it is, a loose cannon on a ship. You have got a powerful offensive weapon, but if it's rolling about unfettered, it will destroy its own vehicle. The message will destroy its own medium. That is, on a ship, when they first put cannons on board, another warship was helpless. We're not talking about getting up close enough to have everybody jump out with knives. You keep your distance, and a cannon will just blow another ship away. Just one good cannonball in the right place, the other ship's done for. But you let the cannon get loose, it's no longer tied down on your ship, and I assume all of you have been on ships enough, or at least once, you know that ships are not very inclined to stand as level as we are. There's usually a certain kind of motion on the oceans. And so if a cannon gets loose, rather than it being a tremendously offensive and potent weapon, it will destroy its own vehicle. If it breaks loose and a cannon begins to roll around, forget the other people having a cannon where they're going to get one good shot at you. This cannon will sink the ship. The human intellect. Now, not from any ordinary view, but from the view of attempting to do something out of the ordinary. It would be, if you could see it, the prototype. It is the example of a loose cannon. That it is to say it is a cogent weapon is to say the obvious. But then if you are attempting to do something other than serve the general needs of life, then you could look upon the human intellect as being a kind of loose cannon, rolling about, and it will end up, on the basis of trying to do something extraordinary with your own nervous system, it can end up destroying the potential of its own carrier, of its own vehicle, its own ship. That is, you in toto. If you let just the ordinary flow of human thought, just as you are, if you just allow it to continue to flow through as it is, then the words are acting as drugs, as they're supposed to, but they will keep you serving the general interest of life for whatever purpose you are wired up to do. You will continue to answer the same doors. You'll only hear the same doors rapped upon. The only things that you will study are those things that seem to pleasurably change your brain chemistry. It's the only things you think about. And I'm saying study in a very broad sense. The things that you daydream about, the things that you think about over and over and over, whether it be wealth, whether it be sex, whether it be food, whether it be sports, whether it be your health. You are drugging yourself. You are drugging yourself in a way that ordinary conceived of addiction is child's play. Because attempting to do this, ordinary thought, there's no word bad enough. Addiction. It is a continual drugging of yourself by thinking the same thing over and over and over and over and over. The way out, amongst other descriptions, is being able not to answer the door, being able to entertain, being able to heed and hark to multiple knocks going on, being able to develop your own language, which amounts to your own words. You don't have to make up whole new words, but it's your own language, a different use of words, so that the effect that words are having on your brain chemistry is not the same old addictive shift in your brain chemistry to which you're accustomed. You need a timeout? How about here's one, might as well get rid of it. I've been waiting off and on for God knows how many years, and I don't guess it'll ever show up, but here's a place. Might as well throw it in. We'll use this sort of like, not comic relief, but, well, some of you will laugh. It's not funny, but it's just sort of like a little timeout. I go, oh, I just thought of something. Oh, I just thought of something. The weirdness of words, that is the drugged, induced state of ordinary thought. What if I told you? Now the sense is going to make sense, except it is going to be an absolute, from any ordinary view, an intellectual slap in the bloody face. The weirdness of the drugs effect of words. What if I told you that crime was caused by a virus? Now, from any ordinary view, that is absolutely insane, impossible, anything you want to call it. Tut tut. What if, and I won't define it, I'll take the ordinary definition of criminal behavior. What if it is caused by a virus? Do you not see that that would absolutely, immediately explain why historically, all the way right up to right now, that the best minds of every century, of every society, and every attempt, every theory they have about crime and what causes people to engage in criminal behavior, all attempts to explain it, all attempts to deal with it, all attempts to stop it have been what? The big F. Not Puccini. Futile. They haven't made one iota of progress. None. If a virus is causing it, do you not see why they hadn't made any progress? Because no one has ever looked there. No one. Now, your ordinary intellect can only be drugged in a certain way. And let's assume that everybody hearing this is reasonably sophisticated, averagely intelligent, a prime middle-class member of Western society circa 1990. And that there is no basis, no one's ever thought about it, no one's ever said it, not in any kind of sane state, has ever even insinuated that criminal behavior might be caused by a virus. It does not affect the brain chemistry in such a way that your brain chemistry goes, huh. Not if you had ordinary brain chemistry. It would almost be like trying to put in a drug that did not fit any particular neural connection anywhere. It's just the kind of thing that you heard the words. It could be true. It could be a fact. But right now, the brain chemistry of humanity could not hear it. If it were a fact, if I knew it for a fact, and I described the virus in some way, they couldn't find it. Because if it was time to find it, they would have already found it. But nobody's even thought about it, much less looked for it. And so they deal with it on the basis that behavior is one thing, and I came up with suddenly a wordy theory, albeit insane, but you do not recall from last time we were taping, I was asking you to consider your own question of whether talk is simply something that people do, is it human behavior, or is talk a piece of people? What is the crime problem? And don't say, well, it's people murdering and shooting and mugging. Right. Because I know what the drug problem is. Well, it's people taking drugs and then murdering and shooting. But some of you got a glimpse of that the drug problem is now the problem. That is the word, the term, the drug problem. What is the crime problem? It's not simply people engaging in certain forbidden behavior. The crime problem now is whatever the human intellect says the crime problem is. Or whatever you, when you see, crime problem grows in the 90s, and you read and go, oh, Jesus. Whatever it is that it's doing to your brain chemistry, that's the crime problem. Now, if somebody actually mugs you and shoots you, now we're dealing with affecting the chemistry below the brain level. We're dealing with a primary affair that someone tried to kill you. But for you to read, for you to hear over the television, the statistics of the crime problem do not look promising. Of course, the radio or TV doesn't go. But you hear it and you go, your brain chemistry goes, That is now the problem. I say now is, it has always been. Because when it is somewhere into the secondary realm, the problem is inseparable from the words that describe it. I'll repeat one more time so that you don't get lost. To say that there is a drug problem, if you found out that your grandmother was on heroin and it was ruining her health, then we'll agree that she is affecting the chemistry. Now forget up here, she's affecting the chemistry of her body, or that she's a secret alcoholic on the side. Well, drug problem. Then yes, that is a problem. But it is not a secondary problem. It is a problem that is nonverbal. It is a problem at the primary level. But that is not the drug problem. The drug problem is a secondary level activity. The drug problem is whatever the words cause the brain chemistry in those who say it, those who hear it, those who read it, whatever effect that the drugs of those words have when they read the drug problem, that is the drug problem. That is the problem, not the taking of drugs. The crime problem, if somebody mugs you and shoots you, that's the crime problem from here down. That's a primary problem. But to be reading about, to be talking about, to be discussing the crime problem, there is the problem. It is not in the physical assault that you might, or anyone might, experience. It is now the talk of it. That is the ultimate drug. That is the ultimate shift in the brain chemistry, is in the words. The crime problem, criminal behavior. Would anybody absolutely now be prepared to say that it might not be caused, what is known as criminal behavior, and I'll take anybody's definition, we'll take every definition ever given, everything ever forbidden by any group, any society, any tribe, that criminal behavior is caused by a virus. Of course, any of you that may think you get something, remember this, virus is a word. If you can pick up, without me repeating a lot of it from last time, you recall that people ordinarily will only study those things. can only study those things that they can talk about. And the little variations I gave, I mentioned that people only talk about and study those things that life needs to be talked and studied about. Or from another sub-view, people will only study those things that they can bear to talk about. To be able to get outside the ordinary addiction of whatever the words are doing to you, it doesn't matter. Everybody is a drunk. Everybody is a drug addict in comparison to trying to do something like this. Everybody is. If you're alive, if the brain is operating, you're on drugs. You're addicted. You will answer the same doors because, as far as you're concerned, it's always the pushers there. Or Smirnoff now is delivering door to door. Or it might be the Pope. It could be death. It could be bad news. Whatever your drugs are, home deliveries are no problem. They're only a thought away. Well, to do something outside the ordinary realm, the real revolutionist, as I have been calling it, the real revolutionist has got to be able to think about and to study things that even he can't talk about. That's one way to say it, that even he can't talk about. The other view is the only things that are worthwhile studying are the things that he could not talk about. Because you could talk about it, it'd be the same as an alcoholic making some sort of attempt to quit, and the attempt is tied directly to the continued consumption of alcohol, is the only thing I know to say. That is, if you are continuing to think the same things, you can believe, well, I'm trying to look at slight variations of it. I've tried to, sometimes I wonder if my opinion about this or that, about human behavior or other people's beliefs, perhaps there's some room for me to shift some of my views. Perhaps I've been too dogmatic. None of that will do. It'll do as a hobby. It'll do as secondary entertainment. But to do this kind of stuff, you got to be able to think in a whole new language. You got to be able to think about things that you can't even talk about, to say the least. Since I did start and headed this, whatever my new creation story and other matters chemical, at least you think I forgot it all, but you can think that if you want to. It's your brain. Then I'll leave on something having to do with the myth again. And what we've been talking about, if you can follow it. The ultimate personal myth for anybody doing this, the ultimate personal myth is your own intelligence. That's it. All right. The supreme ritual is in acknowledging your own new nervous system. I'm going to say it, so listen. God voice. No capital G. It got nothing to do with gods of your ancestors. But it has to do with what appears to be the myth of something transcendental. Something outside your ordinary drugged experience of thinking the same thing over and over. The dream that there is some kind of drug that I have yet to have. That is, there's something I can feel or think that I've yet to experience. That kind of ritual is in recognizing, being able to acknowledge in your own nervous system the new voice. That is, a new language, a new knock, being able to think from a new building site. And when I gave the little caveat that I didn't mean God voice in any sort of ordinary sense, and certainly no sort of blasphemous sense for those that can hear blasphemy knocking on their doors. But it has to do with this, and this kind of five-dimensionally circular activity, wherein the doors that go in come out. And if yours don't, then you should take up that good blues attitude that if I ain't coming in, ain't nobody coming out. The ritual, me saying, paying homage to your own new voice, what it amounts to is a kind of running through man and running back through life and then running back through man. Is you acknowledging that the real myth, the supreme ritual, is acknowledgement of your own nervous system, brain-wise. What it amounts to is you paying homage to life itself, that is, to life's preeminent marvel. That is the only personal myth that anyone outside the ordinary drug society of ordinary thought would ever have. There is no other myth. There's nowhere to look. There's no monastery to go find. There is no other person, no matter how old, how dead, how young, how handsome, how ugly, how verbose, how silent. Everything else is a drug. You can't control it. You're not supposed to control it. The only myth, the only heroic myth, the only ritual is this. It is, as far as you'll ever know, if you ever know better, then you and I will talk about it in private. But under all ordinary conditions, the only myth, the only super reality, the only ritual, the only heroic sensation, the only new drug, or the only non-drug state, the only thing worthy of any attention is this. Because anything else, anybody can do. Anybody can lose weight, anybody can put on muscle, anybody can run, anybody can quit running, anybody can get rich, anybody can lose it all of that stuff. And they do it not because they do it. There is nothing to worship. There is nothing to give homage to. There's nothing to even acknowledge. There is nothing worthwhile if you're attempting to do this, because the only thing worthy of any respect, as far as you'll ever see, unless you see more, we're come to see more, is the preeminent, the preeminent marvel is this.